America the Great or America the Oligarchy? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Look around at the scope of American politics and answer me this. Who's running things? We already know in Joe Biden's White House that it's not Joe Biden running things, but for years now, even before Joe Biden, there's been an unsettling feeling about the direction politicians take when they legislate, when they advocate, when they push forward agendas. Because too often, it seems as if the agendas, the platforms, the bills, the pieces of legislation, the ideas that politicians from both parties, but mostly Democrats, that politicians are advancing aren't really representative of the people who pay their salaries. So, who are they representing? Big businesses, it seems like. Big tech, to be specific. And you know where that is leading. Before I get into all that, I want to give a quick mention that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can subscribe to Bold and Blunt. First off, wherever podcasts are offered. Second off, at WashingtonTimes.com, just go to the podcast section at the top of the page. Click on it, find my name, and you can subscribe there. Or you can scroll to the bottom of the page in the newsletter section, find my name, and sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter that contains all my commentaries I write for the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. And thirdly, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. I am very happy and proud to announce that Bold and Blunt is among its lineup. Now back to America the Great. America the Oligarchy. Let's check this out. Let's check it out from the standpoint of the economy. Listen to this. Listen to this in my email box from, let me see where it's from, the Capital Guardian. An interesting little paragraph. Interest rate shock on the $30 trillion national debt. Listen to this. About $6.89 trillion of the $23.8 trillion of publicly held debt. I know the money, the numbers get meaningless after a while. Trillion, billion, gazillion, whatever. Anyhow, about 6.89 trillion of the 23.8 trillion of publicly held debt, which is about 29%, is coming due in the next year, according to the latest data from the U.S. Treasury. Meaning, for every increased percentage point of interest owed on the debt, U.S. taxpayers, you and me, will owe an extra $69 billion, largely a function of short-term lending rates rising amid the Federal Reserve's current interest rate hikes. If the Fed were to suddenly hike interest rates on the short end of the yield curve to match inflation, in other words, if the Fed were to behave in a way that honestly represents what's going on in America's economy right now, interest owed on the debt would skyrocket. Listen to this, one more line. For example, if the federal funds rate were to suddenly rise to 8.6%, pulling U.S. Treasury's rates with it, gross interest owed on the debt, currently projected by the OMB to be $560 billion in 2022, get this, would increase by $447 billion to more than $1 trillion. My goodness, America has a debt problem, yes? But listen to Joe Biden and nothing to see here, folks. Go home. Nothing to worry about.
Should Americans be prepared for a recession? In your view, is a recession in the United States inevitable?
No.
Why not?
Look, you're talking about the significant progress we've made in making sure we don't have supply chain backups. about the 8,000 jobs that Hyundai is going to be bringing to Georgia?
Oh, that was a month ago. Joe Biden, our president, our fearless leader, Joe Biden, explaining away any concerns that you average peon American that you might have about inflation. Not to worry, he says. And that was a month ago. Now listen.
Since I took office, families are carrying less debt. Their average savings are up. A recent survey from the Federal Reserve found that more Americans feel financially comfortable than any time since the survey began in 2013.
Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel more comfortable than you felt, say, a year and a half ago when there was a different president in the White House? Do you feel comfortable, moms out there, knowing that when you go to the grocery store to purchase tampons or baby formula that, it's a 50-50, may be there or may not. It may take you a full day of driving around from store to store to store and then finally going home and searching online for delivery from a store in the Midwest, in California, or wherever, in order to get the supplies you need to feed your babies. But that's more comfortable than we've all been at any time. Good thing Joe Biden is there to tell us this, because otherwise these rising prices, these empty store shelves, these difficulties and challenges and outright inabilities to find and purchase certain needed products may confuse us into thinking that there's a problem with the economy, that there's this thing called inflation or supply chain issues. Yes, it's a good thing we have Joe Biden to clarify. That was Biden 2 weeks ago, by the way. And now today? Well, let's see what Joe Biden today is saying about the economy and recession and inflation and supply chain and so on and so forth. This from Joe Biden on Monday, June 20th, in a press conference from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Joe Biden told reporters this: there's nothing inevitable about a recession. Nothing inevitable, nothing to see here. Go home, folks. Forget about all those economists out there who are predicting recession, who are predicting more gloom and doom on the economy. Nothing to see here. Joe Biden said it, so it must be true. Or is it? Look, if politicians, if the Democrat Party specifically, but if politicians in general were in it these days for the American people like they're supposed to be in it, then they wouldn't try and sell us a line of delusional crap about how great the economy is and how inflation is a sign of a chugging along economy and how inflation is actually a positive symbol and how we should all be grateful for inflation. This was the line that a Joe Biden White House economist tried to sell months ago, back when inflation, we were told as American citizens, was just something that was a blip on Joe Biden's economic plan and that would go by the wayside soon enough, quickly enough, if we just gave him the patience that he deserved. Of course, it hasn't, because Joe Biden has no plan to address rising prices, runaway prices, rising gas and fuel prices. He has no plan because ultimately, in the end, he is not beholden to the American citizens, and neither are those in the Democrat Party, and sad to say, neither are some in the Republican Party either. The interests of many politicians we elect in this country to serve us, to protect the Constitution, the interests are more aligned with global entities or even Chinese entities, because the worry of these politicians is that big tech dollars won't flow into their campaign coffers if they dare stand tall for the lowly American voter. they're more beholden to corporate interests, to big tech interests, to the far leftists running the big tech interests than they are to American citizens. And that is the shame of America the Great, no longer now America the Oligarch, which in essence is a government run by a few select interests. This is where we're at in America right now. Read the tea leaves. Read the tea leaves, read the signs, and listen to how the Democrats, led by Joe Biden, try to disguise and deceive that this is the actual truth of where we are in America today. Well, my guest flushes this out much better than I could. His name is Dave Brat. He is a former politician. You all know him as the Tea Party darling who took down Eric Cantor in a 2014 congressional race. He is now serving as the Dean of Liberty University School of Business, and he's on Bold and Blunt today, once again, to talk about the state of America, the state of America's economy, and address the matter of America, the oligarchy. So Dave, thank you so much for being back on Bold and Blunt. It's great to have you as a guest again.
Cheryl, you're a superstar. Love what you do. So thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. So let's talk Joe Biden's economy. What is he doing that is good for America right now?
Well, not much, and I think you phrased it properly. He's looking out for the interests of those who have invested and captured industries in our country from abroad, most likely, especially China when it comes to this new Green Deal going back to Al Gore. The left has realized they can, dictate another 10% to 20% of our economy by controlling and making all of those monies go through D.C., the swamp, and regulation. And then you throw in Obamacare, another 20% of the economy, and you're talking real money. And so, as usual, it's all about power and control out of the left. And the energy policy right now is just, we used to have full spectrum energy dominance across the board. Oil, gasoline, natural gas, and the green stuff that emerges from the market is fine. But now they've overridden that, and we're going to have energy shortages, $6 gas, and food shortages, believe it or not, in the United States coming up if we don't get our act together, and I see no signs that we're going to get our act together.
I agree with you, and it as far as what you just said, especially the part about no signs of showing that we're going to get our act together. So it leads into this question. It's hard to imagine that Democrats, economically speaking, are that ignorant. So the only reason for the actions that they're taking under this Joe Biden administration must be one of strategy and purposeful intent. What is their end game?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, that's clear. And, Marx, I've been in higher ed for my whole life, 30, 40 years. And Marx has permeated higher education. And the goal of Marx, which if you take him seriously, and everybody ought to, going through the Frankfurt School and Marcuse, and if people don't know those links through the elite establishment schools in our country, you need to learn those. But Marx rejected God and ethics and any metaphysics, right? So he rejected concepts like human rights and equality, et cetera, out of hand. So then your question fits, like, well, then what are they doing? And it's very clear in all Marxist lands, right? You just look at China and Russia as your two examples. You get rid of God, you get rid of guns, you accumulate power, and you control everybody. And it's shocking to have to see our country moving in that direction. The old liberals, right? The old JFK liberals, or Truman was a great man, great leader, great American. And they used to be liberals. And the founders, we've had liberals who, the root word is liberty. And the liberals used to hold conservatives in check, and the conservatives didn't have it all right, right? We had too much business power and too much chummy behavior with the wealthy, and didn't always look out best for the middle class. But now there's a new synthesis coming, politics that's going to be populist in nature with a middle class, going through the African-American community, Hispanics, suburban moms who care about their kids not getting groomed in education. And I think there's a powerful new force for the good coming. And by the good, I mean the old Judeo-Christian tradition and just the values and virtues we've held for 200 years start to come back into vogue again, hopefully.
Yeah, I do see that backlash as well from the conservative movement, Christian conservatism in particular. But I think there's still a misstep that many on the right have in that they underestimate the utter evil that has really taken over the Democrat Party. They say things like, and I heard it just from somebody I was chatting with today in the conservative movement, who just could not fathom the idea of what Democrats will get by crumbling America. And it's that viewpoint that I think is kind of holding back some in the conservative movement from fighting.
Yeah, well, I was in the swamp underneath the old kind of calculation, and the calculation was this Brat guy, he's for the Constitution and free markets and the Judeo-Christian tradition, and he's speaking out against our party a little bit, and we'll just get rid of him, and then, in 2 years the cycle will run its course, and we'll put another, establishment person in there. And that no longer is the calculus that's involved, right? There is a realignment going along with Democrats and Republicans. And you're right, and what our folks don't want to see is because they don't want to have to articulate it. Because if you articulate it now, I used to get in trouble with the press back then, right? 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Right now, if you articulate anything going against the current progressive leftist Marxist agenda, you are toast, and they do come after you hard. So most of the Republicans do have some sense. I mean, and they know deep down. I mean, if you just look at our cities, all of our major cities have been turned into war zones and drug zones and homeless zones. And then you say, if the liberals, right, the liberals always say they care about the poor. Well, if you care about the poor, you'd care about the K-12 education system probably more than anything. That's probably the most powerful, systematic thing you can do to help the poor rise and become wealthy. But you'll never hear the left say we want the poor to become wealthy. The only thing you hear them say is we want to offer another program so we control them. And so our guy, it's a combination. But mainly, there's not enough courage. That's the fundamental virtue upon all the rest. Is if you don't have courage, the rest of them kind of fade and fold. And I think that's what's missing up in the swamp.
Do you think that there are many in both Democrat and Republican parties who think that America is on the downslide, China is on the upswing, and that if they want to be part of this new world economy where China dominates, not just economically, but socially speaking, that they need to get in on board with Chinese ways?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. China is the key that unlocks a lot of the mystery here. And, again, just for example, when I was in Congress, I wouldn't go along with this. I wouldn't promise to vote for the budget. I wouldn't promise to vote for certain leaders. And so I wasn't allowed on any committees, and I wasn't given any money. So that's the same for everybody. And it's also the same on the Democrat side, which is even more problematic, right? Biden's got connections with China that have been written about all over. With Biden Jr., it's ridiculous. And you've been at the lead there. But what's really going on here? Who does run the country right now, right? The oligarchs and the billionaires are clearly in charge of our economy and our foreign policy. Our 5 big tech firms, the CEOs are all on the left, and those big 5 tech firms have market cap worth more than all European firms combined. Our U.S. 5 tech firms have a market cap that's worth more than all of China market cap combined. It's staggering. And so, if you already have the consumer base built here, and there's another 1.4 billion people over there, and a $20 trillion economy in the works that could be powerful, I think that's another story. I think they're wobbling significantly right now. But it's just clear, yes, of course, they want to expand their tentacles there. They're all Democrat. They're all on the left, the CEOs of the U.S., and our politicians are beholden to these trillionaires. And it's not only beholden, it's completely beholden. And so, yeah, the whole thing is tied to China, and that's just one example. Right? You can go off on the Wuhan and the virus and all this stuff.
You know, I wanted to talk about Joe Biden's inflation and how that was going to influence the coming elections, but you just bring up a very fascinating point that really should be talked about more. Is America an oligarchy now?
Yeah, absolutely. It was back when I was in, but no one would talk about it. But now it's just very clear the money runs things, right? Me and Gary Palmer tried to save $40 billion we pay to dead people. We thought that was kind of a common sense idea. So we went to the speaker, and you can do the math on who that was. Say, hey, can we save $40 billion pay to dead people? And they, no. Can we ask why not? Nope. It wouldn't give us an answer. The answer is because that $40 billion is already up there. It's already going to somebody, right? And to save $40 billion, you got to take it away from one of your buddies to put it toward the debt and deficit. And that number was $40 billion. That's a teaspoon of money up there, right? So that's just one example that shows you, yes, all the money that goes through D.C., which is about $4 trillion a year, right? $3 trillion is the budget, and then we spend another $1 trillion in deficit every year. Now it's $1.5 trillion. And all that money is going to a buddy of somebody. It's not going toward the best interests of the U.S. And now that debt, right, one of the interesting things about Biden's inflation is there's a thing in economics called moral hazard. And so if you would have run normal interest rates, right, the interest rate, the Fed funds rate should be, 2, 3, 4% or whatever. Well, just do a thought experiment. Say you get inflation on top of that and you're running 10% interest rates and you owe $30 trillion. Well, that means you owe $3 trillion in interest payments per year. That's the total size of the U.S. federal budget, right?
Wow.
And so another reason that the inflation is so dangerous, on top of already ruining your investments, the stock market crashing, and on top of you losing 10% of your income every year due to inflation and higher prices, we also, the American people, didn't see the full cost of debt of that $30 trillion. No one even knows what that means because zero interest rates have been in place for 10 years. So the Fed has cloaked the true cost to America of our big government spending tragedy. And now it's all coming to a head. The sugar high is done. The $9 trillion on the Fed Reserve balance sheet is toast. The $30 trillion on the spending side has come to an end. The checks going out have come to an end. And now you're going to see very clearly the real economy, right? Not the stock market and all the financialization, but the real economy. You're going to see the true investment we've made in that thing over the past decades, and it's zero. And so that it's going to take us a decade or two to dig out and re-energize that engine that made us great.
That's if there's political will to do the digging.
Right, that's right.
And look, to me, this is the bigger peril of an oligarchy, is that ultimately elections won't matter.
Yeah, no, that is right. And now the gun thing came up, right?
Right.
Senator Cornyn's in the crosshairs.
Right.
They've done Texas, and they're chipping away at the Second Amendment, and the left goes nuts on these kind of things. But when you talk about the oligarchs, and the left is saying their new political talk, they're scared of democracy, right? The attack on democracy, and they're scared of totalitarians, right? So one thing I've discovered in 8th grade civics is if you don't want a totalitarian regime, you should have a small federal government, right? So other than that contradiction, the left has it all straight, right? So if you don't want a totalitarian regime, don't give the federal government more power than you want. Number two, if you don't want a totalitarian, it'd be nice to not chip away at the Second Amendment, because that's the surest safeguard that the First Amendment of freedom to religion, association, expression will be protected. And the left just gives it away over and over and over. They have no interest in true democracy or true civil society or decentralization and federalism, bringing power back to the states. They want it all right up in D.C. where they can control it, and it's obvious to everyone now.
And now you have these companies stepping in and acting as quasi-governments, doing the bidding of the far leftists in government who are constrained by the Constitution. And so now you have companies doing all that woke type of bidding of the government anyhow. So really, what difference does it make if people vote? That's what it's coming down to.
Yep.
Though
well, it's still there. And on top of voting, this ESG stuff, right?
Yes.
You're just talking about, and the woke Fortune 500 and all that, they've overstepped. And Larry at BlackRock has overstepped by far. And so they're retrenching, right? They had to admit a couple months ago that Russia, believe it or not, is bad. Totally bad, right? So that was a shocking admission they had to make. They're not still there on the China admission, but it's just sitting there, right, for everybody to make. And then some of the Disney stuff, and they're getting in trouble for some of the propositions they've gone with. And so the American people need to realign their stocks, realign their retirement accounts for real, right, with Kingdom advisors or financial advisors that share their faith or share their allegiance to the country and patriotism. But you shift your money out of the junk and put it in the good guys, and you can change the country.
And just a quick note to finish up with this question about the coming elections. Do you see any way that Democrats could possibly win with this inflation, this economy? You can't find baby formula and tampons, for crying out loud, on store shelves nowadays?
No, I don't see it. But, you know, our guys can snatch victory from defeat pretty. They're capable of it, our leadership, right? And so one thing is, you know, if they don't message on anything, I think that's a terrible miscalculation. They're saying, you know, the other side's digging a hole, let them keep digging. Well, that's fine, but you do have to offer up some strategy and some set of principles you believe in and are going to run on to juxtapose against the leftist assault. And we haven't done that. We just need a simple, you know, a contract with America again that just shows the people where sanity lies and what principles will be invoked. But our leadership, you know, just wants to run the ship kind of. I mean, I hate to say it, as if they're the king, right? They want to control every single seat, so they get the money out and let everybody run individually. They don't want to have a strategy. And that was true every week up in Congress in the swamp when I sat in the conference meeting. There was no overall strategy. Obamacare failed because of that. We never bring up the rest of the world in the Republican conference, and we need to do that.
Maybe they need more Dave Brats. Any plans to run again for Congress or any other seat?
I'm waiting for the clouds to part. On this one, I'll need a clear voice. So until that happens, I love being the dean up here at Liberty University. We have great students, great faculty. Bring the kids up here. I'm on the third floor. Love to give them a tour of the business school.
Oh, yeah. You're doing the important work of training the youth, the future leaders of America, in the constitutional way they should go. So thank you so much for the work you do for America. And thank you so much for being such a great guest on Bold and Blunt.
Yep, sure. Thank you for your courage, the chief virtue in the political realm, and for all the other virtues you possess as well. It's been fun watching you and all the books you put out, and I hope everyone out there listening has read all those. So I wish you well. Keep it up. Get me on anytime you want. God bless everybody out there.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say, and God bless. He's such a great guest. I love having him on Bold and Blunt. So, America the exceptional, America the great, America the free, or America the oligarchy? You decide. And while you're deciding, I want to say a quick thank you to all those who subscribe to Bold and Blunt. And if you don't subscribe, check it out at edify.app. You can subscribe to Bold and Blunt there. That is your platform for faith-based podcasts. Or, of course, at washingtontimes.com or anywhere podcasts are offered. And one other quick note. Get my latest book, Lock Down, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. It's the book that the far left does not want you to read. So immediately rush out and buy it and put it on your reading list. And as always, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.